There was goat cheese in my beard when she told the table she wanted a divorce. Yeah, that's how it started. No dramatic music, no slammed doors, no late-night screaming match. Just a half-finished charcuterie board, some over-salty olives, and a joke that wasn't a joke. Tessa turned to her friends, laughed way too hard, and blurted out, "Honestly, I've been thinking about divorcing him just so I can finally get my Saturdays back." They howled. Meanwhile, I was still chewing an almond. Nobody looked at me. Not even her. I don't even think she realized I was sitting right there, 4 feet away, my wine glass still in the air, frozen mid-sip like an idiot. I blinked, swallowed, and said, calm as I could, "Okay, I'll prepare the papers." Dead silence. And then her friends did that awkward, high-pitched giggle people do when they think you're being sarcastic, but they're not sure. Tessa looked confused, then embarrassed, then mad. But I meant it. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 2 days before, I'd found an Uber receipt she forgot to delete. It wasn't going to yoga, and it wasn't to her office. It was for a hotel across town, one with hourly rates and tinted windows. I'd said nothing. I thought maybe I was paranoid. Maybe it was something else. Maybe the universe was testing my trust. But when she laughed about divorcing me like I was some overcooked side dish she could just send back to the kitchen, yeah, no, that was it. I stood up, left my wallet on the table, and walked out of Coral's stupid house. No yelling, no drama. Just left the cheese board, the embarrassment, and my marriage behind. She followed me to the driveway a few minutes later, still barefoot, still with a smear of lipstick on her wine glass. "What the hell was that?" she hissed. "Divorce," I said. "I'm taking it seriously. You should too." I was kidding, Eli. But here's the kicker. I don't think she was. Not really. She was already halfway out the door. That little joke? That wasn't a mistake, it was a test. And she thought I'd beg. She thought I'd cry. She thought I'd grovel like I always did. But I didn't. Because in my gut, I knew. I knew she wasn't just done with our marriage. She was already halfway into someone else's bed. You know what's funny? I still wanted to be wrong. Even when I found the second phone. Even when I saw the messages. Even when the photos loaded, and my heart stopped. I still wanted to believe this was a bad dream I could rewind. But there's no rewind button when your wife sends a mirror selfie to a guy named Clayton while telling you she's too exhausted from work to cuddle tonight. And that's where it all really began. I didn't go home that night. Not out of principle or pride. I just couldn't bear the idea of sitting across from her at the dinner table, pretending I hadn't seen that second phone. I had found it by accident the day before Coral's brunch. It was under the passenger seat of her car, probably slipped out of her purse when she leaned over to grab her protein bar, or whatever she eats now that carbs are evil. It was black, no case, and still had the plastic on the back. Brand new. But it wasn't locked. I don't know if she trusted I'd never find it, or if she was just careless, but my hands were shaking as I swiped it open. And there he was. Clayton. The name alone made me feel like someone had stuffed cotton into my ears and pulled the air from my lungs. The chat app they used wasn't even a normal one. Some off-brand thing I'd never heard of, probably to keep things hidden. I scrolled through messages that started weeks ago, possibly months. Everything was there. The inside jokes, the late-night selfies, the "you looked so hot" sneaking out like that kind of texts. I took pictures of everything with my own phone. My hands were slick with sweat, but I documented it all. And then I tucked the phone right back where I found it and got out of her car like I hadn't just watched my marriage rot from the inside. That's what made her little joke at brunch unbearable. I already knew. I already had proof. But instead of giving me the dignity of honesty, she decided to parade her boredom with me in front of her glittery gaggle of friends like I was some charity husband she regretted adopting. I spent the night at a 24-hour diner across town. Ordered pancakes. Didn't eat them. Just sat there under flickering lights, scrolling through photos of my wife with her arms wrapped around another man. Photos she took on our anniversary. The timestamp was right there. June 2nd. She'd told me she was going to a wellness retreat that weekend. Said she needed to reconnect with herself. And I believed her. Like an idiot. I must have reread that one message 100 times. I don't think Eli suspects anything. He's sweet, but he's beige. Beige. That's what I was to her. All those years I thought I was her anchor, her safe place, her constant. Turns out I was her wallpaper. The background to a better, more exciting fantasy she built with a man who used gym emojis and didn't know how to spell definitely. I called out of work the next day. I told my boss I had food poisoning. In a way, I did, just not from food. It was betrayal that made me sick. I couldn't think, couldn't eat, couldn't even sit still. I paced the hallway of our apartment like a ghost waiting for his own haunting to begin. When she finally walked through the door that night, smiling, holding a takeout bag like nothing had happened, I felt my entire body tighten. She gave me a kiss on the cheek and said, "Sorry about earlier. The girls were just messing around. You know how brunch gets." I nodded, smiled even. Then I asked her softly, "Who's Clayton?" The bag dropped. Her face turned gray. She didn't even ask how I knew. She just stood there, frozen, mouth slightly open, like her brain had forgotten how to form lies fast enough. "I can explain," she finally said. But I didn't want explanations anymore. I wanted distance. I wanted clarity. And if I couldn't have either, I wanted control. Because if she thought walking all over me was easy, I was going to show her what beige does when it breaks. And I hadn't even called the lawyer yet. The first lie is always the hardest. After that, they just slip out like muscle memory. She started slow, with the classics. It didn't mean anything. And it was just texting. And my personal favorite. I only met him once, and nothing happened. I didn't even argue. I just stared at her like she was a foggy mirror I couldn't see myself in anymore. 12 years, and I couldn't recognize the person in front of me. Not the voice, not the posture, not even the panic. It wasn't the guilt of someone caught doing something wrong. It was the fear of losing control. That's what made her sweat. Not the cheating. The fact that I didn't scream. That I didn't collapse or beg her to stay. I told her I was going for a walk. I needed air, sure, but I also needed time. Because in that moment, I realized something. She was lying too fast. The kind of speed that only comes with practice. Clayton wasn't the first. And definitely not the last. And that's when the rot went even deeper. Back at the diner, on a whim, I had installed a basic data extractor app onto the iPad linked to her iCloud. It was still quietly syncing everything behind the scenes. I hadn't even touched it since the night of the brunch. But now, with her spinning tales inside our apartment, I sat in the car and opened the app on my phone. I felt like I was about to read a horror novel written in real time. There were folders, labeled by initials, JWC, L, DM. Each one held dozens of photos, messages, videos. Some going back years. Some from when we were still saving up for our first house. Some from the week we miscarried and I held her through tears, while she was texting someone else 3 hours later, thanking him for making her feel seen. I wanted to puke. She'd built a whole secret archive. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a hobby. Like she had this shadow life that ran parallel to ours, with flings mapped across cities like coffee shops she tried once and rated out of 5 stars. Men who didn't know her birthday, or what side she slept on, or how she panicked during thunderstorms. But they knew the body I once thought was mine. They had pieces of her smile that I thought only I had earned. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. I felt small, like wallpaper in my own life. I sat there in the driver's seat, screen glowing, hands trembling, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. And then it happened, something that still makes my stomach flip. A new notification popped up, from a name I hadn't seen before. "Can't wait to see you again next weekend. We're that little black thing. You know the one." Timestamp, 10 minutes ago. She had sent it while we were standing in the kitchen, while I was asking her who Clayton was, while she pretended to cry. That was it. I snapped. Quietly, but completely. I walked back into the apartment. She was on the couch, holding her head, eyes red like she had forced out tears for the performance. "I'm going to a hotel," I said. "I'll be back tomorrow for my things." "Eli, please," she croaked. "Can we just talk about this? It wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't mean for any of this to." "You meant it enough to schedule next weekend," I said. "I saw the message. While you were lying." She froze. Her jaw tightened. And then, for the first time, she didn't deny it. She just whispered, "I didn't think you'd ever look." That told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't been hiding it because she was afraid of hurting me. She was hiding it because she was so confident I'd never grow a spine. She had bet on my silence, my softness, my beige. But beige was done bleeding. She followed me to the door, started yelling that she'd ruin me if I made a scene. Said she'd tell everyone I was controlling. Said she'd flip the narrative. I just looked at her and smiled, the same way she smiled at that brunch table before it all started. I said, "Don't worry. I won't make a scene. I'm going to make a spreadsheet." She looked confused. She should have. Because I wasn't bluffing. I was about to build the most detailed, time-stamped archive of infidelity her lawyer would ever see. Because Beige remembers everything. The hotel wasn't glamorous. The kind of place where the vending machine hums louder than the air conditioner and the carpet smells like off-brand lemon cleaner. I didn't care. I sat on the edge of the bed like a man who had just crawled out of his own skin. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe an hour. Maybe 3. The curtains were drawn. My phone was off. My chest felt tight, like grief was a fist curling around my ribs and slowly squeezing. This was the part they don't tell you about. The numbness. Everyone imagines the big confrontation, the yelling, the grand exit. No one talks about the quiet room afterward, where all your worst thoughts echo back like ghosts. I had spent 12 years becoming a version of myself I thought she wanted. Predictable. Steady. Forgiving. What a joke. She hadn't wanted a husband. She wanted a placeholder. A warm, quiet space between flings. But the worst part? The part one hated admitting even to myself? I still loved her. That realization hit me like a second betrayal. I loved a woman who would never stop cheating. A woman who made jokes about divorcing me while messaging 3 other men from the same dinner table. I loved her even now, after reading all of it. And I hated myself for it. I took a hot shower. It didn't help. I stared at my reflection in the fogged-up mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. I looked like a bad decision wearing a cardigan. Eyes red. Face pale. I was the kind of guy women leave not for something better, but for something more exciting. That's all it was. Excitement. Novelty. And now, I was used up wallpaper. And yet, I wasn't ready to burn it all down. Not yet. Not before I had every detail. Every angle. So I turned my phone back on and did something I hadn't done in years. I called her sister. Now, before you think this is about getting sympathy, it's not. Lorna and Tessa hadn't spoken in 6 months. Some big fight over Christmas plans. I stayed out of it. But I remembered something Lorna said a few years back, in the kitchen while the sisters were pretending to be close. She thinks the rules don't apply to her. Lorna had told me while rinsing out a wine glass. You just don't see it yet. But one day you will. Well, Day's here. I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding tired and cautious. I got straight to the point. Told her I found the phone. That there were multiple men. That I was filing for divorce and gathering proof. There was silence on her end. Then Lorna let out a slow sigh. She's still doing that? She asked quietly. Still. I echoed. My stomach dropped. She's been cheating since year 3, Eli, she said, like it was an uncomfortable truth she'd locked in a box long ago. I tried to warn her. I even tried to warn you once. But you always looked at her like she hung the moon. I figured you'd never believe me. I was stunned. Why didn't you say anything? I did, she said. Once. But she told you I was jealous. And you believed her. I couldn't speak. She wasn't wrong. I had believed her. Back then, Tessa told me Lorna had issues with boundaries and was bitter because she couldn't hold a relationship. I had taken her side instantly. Blindly. Like the fool I was. Lorna stayed on the phone with me for nearly an hour that night. Told me stories I didn't want to hear. Names I didn't recognize. Patterns I couldn't ignore. She even sent me screenshots from old texts Tessa had sent her by accident. One of which included a selfie in lingerie she meant to send someone named D. She said, if you're finally ready to walk away, I'll help you make sure she doesn't flip the story. And that was when the seed of revenge really took root. Not petty revenge. Not keying her car or setting her clothes on fire. Something more controlled. Surgical. Because she'd been lying so long, she probably believed she could lie her way out of anything. But she didn't know what I knew now. She didn't know I had a witness. A relative witness. One who wasn't afraid to talk. I didn't sleep much that night. The hotel bed creaked every time I shifted, and even when I closed my eyes, the images haunted me. Clayton's messages, the folders of initials, Tessa's ghost-pale face when I said I'd seen everything. But it wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the rage beneath it, slow boiling and sharp, like a cracked pipe leaking gas just beneath the surface. She hadn't just disrespected me. She had studied how to get away with it. And maybe, in her own twisted way, she thought I'd always be too fragile to really look deeper. That I'd be hurt, yes, but harmless. That's the role I'd played for a decade. Eli, the safe husband. The beige guy. The man who'd stay even when he shouldn't. But something shifted in me that night. Some wall I'd been leaning on finally collapsed, and underneath it, I found something I didn't know I had. Discipline. Not fury. Not chaos. Precision. I woke up around 5 a.m., heart pounding like I'd been running in my dreams. I sat up, grabbed my laptop, and opened our shared financial portal. Nothing dramatic at first. The usual: rent, groceries, gym memberships, Amazon orders that I didn't recognize but had stopped questioning long ago. Then I filtered by credit card accounts. There were two under her name. One I knew about, the one we used for shared expenses. The other, I had never seen before. It wasn't listed under the usual tab. It was buried in the linked accounts section under an old backup email she used when we were still dating. I clicked it. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. For the past 11 months, Tessa had been funneling hundreds of dollars each month to someone listed only as Sparrow Project via PayBuddy, a third-party transfer service. The payment descriptions were vague: consulting, wellness, coaching, balance work. But the amounts were consistent, between $200 and $800 every few weeks. It didn't feel like therapy. It felt like she was paying someone to stay silent. I dug deeper, matched the timestamps to her text backups, and like an avalanche gathering weight as it falls, the picture formed itself. Ugly, undeniable. These weren't payments to a therapist. They were payments to men. One of them had even sent her an invoice. An invoice with an actual breakdown. Photos, $150. Time, $300. Discretion, $200. Discretion. She wasn't just cheating. She was hiring them. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of bizarre sugar baby arrangement, and she was the one paying to feel adored. But the more I read, the worse it got. These weren't relationships. They were transactions. Scheduled meetings. Code names. Location tags sent and immediately deleted. She'd made a system out of it. A rhythm. A spreadsheet somewhere in her mind where I was nothing more than a number. It was beyond betrayal. It was fraudulent intimacy. I sat there, breathing through my teeth, palms sweating, as I downloaded every statement and cross-referenced them against her known location history. Some payments lined up with weekends she claimed to be at retreats. Others were made the night she told me she was staying late at work because of back-to-back strategy meetings. She was never at work. She was never at those retreats. She was paying men to play house with her for a few hours while I was folding her laundry and making sure the cat got her thyroid meds. And it didn't stop there. I found Venmo notes to her best friend Coral. Stupid emojis, lips, champagne, devil horns, with amounts like $50 here, $75 there. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice. But now, I knew. Coral was helping her cover this up. Maybe booking hotels. Maybe providing alibis. There was no innocent explanation anymore. This wasn't one affair. It was a network. I had everything I needed to tear her world down. And yet, I wasn't ready. Not because I didn't want to, but because if I was going to do this, I needed to do it surgically. I wasn't going to scream at her. I wasn't going to expose her in public. No revenge porn. No angry Facebook posts. I wasn't a monster. But I was going to make sure she felt it. The quiet kind of pain. The kind that shows up in court papers and frozen accounts. The kind that makes you realize the safe one was never weak. He was watching. I called my friend Daniel, the one who'd helped my cousin with his divorce last year. Told him I needed a discreet consultation. Gave him the short version. His silence said everything. Eli, he finally said, if even half of what you're telling me is real, this could swing the settlement in your favor. In a big way. I didn't want her money. I wanted her cornered. And I was almost there. I returned to the apartment just before sunset, still wearing the same clothes I'd left in. I did it on purpose. I wanted her to see the bags under my eyes, the wrinkled collar, the man she thought she'd broken. I wanted her to mistake the mess for weakness. Because if Tessa believed I was still fragile, she'd let her guard down. And she did. She jumped off the couch when I opened the door, barefoot, mascara smeared like she'd been crying. The living room looked staged, candles lit, a soft throw blanket folded just so. Her phone placed screen down on the coffee table. She'd put on one of those old sweaters I always said I loved. Nostalgia cosplay. She hugged me like I was the last bus out of a burning city. I let her. I've been so scared, she whispered into my shoulder. I thought you were done with me. I didn't say anything. I didn't nod or hold her tighter. I just stood there, letting her press into me like nothing had happened, like she hadn't been paying men under fake names while I learned how to cook her favorite soup from scratch. And when she finally let go, wiping her eyes with a sleeve she'd worn on our 5th anniversary, I gave her what she needed most: false hope. "We'll talk later," I said. I went into the bedroom and shut the door. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I pulled out the flash drive I'd been carrying and got to work. "Here's something you need to understand about Tessa. She lies best when she feels forgiven. It's when she thinks she's safe that she gets sloppy." I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was studying her, mapping the pattern, watching how she cycled through guilt, deflection, victimhood, and weaponized tears. So I left my laptop open on the kitchen table that night. On purpose. I opened an empty email draft addressed to my lawyer, titled "Divorce Evidence, All Files." And I left the tab with my financial records open just behind it, not minimized. Her laptop was dead. Her phone was in the other room. And I knew she wouldn't resist. I waited in bed, pretending to sleep. At 2:17 a.m., I heard the chair scrape quietly across the hardwood floor. A pause. Then clicks. Hesitant at first, then faster. Her breath shallow. I watched the glow of the screen under the door crack. 5 minutes later, she returned to bed. I didn't say a word, because now I had her panic. Not just her cheating, her active obstruction. She had deleted 3 folders off my desktop, but I'd already mirrored everything to a cloud account she didn't know existed. I wanted her to delete it. I wanted her to believe she had some control left. I wanted her to reach for the wheel, so I could snap it out of her hands. The next morning, she made pancakes. From scratch. Even used the cinnamon I like that she always said was too expensive for weekday breakfast. She kept glancing at me like a cat who'd left a dead bird on the doormat and wanted applause. "You slept okay?" she asked. I looked up from my plate. "Yeah, dreamless." She smiled, almost triumphantly, like she thought she'd won, like we were somehow going to step over the landmine and carry on like nothing ever happened. But that was the last calm moment she'd have for a while. Because that afternoon, I called Coral. She didn't expect it. She stammered when she picked up, thinking it was a butt dial. I kept it short. "You helped her cover this up." "I know." Eli, wait, you don't understand." "I'm not asking," I said. "I'm informing you. If your name appears in the deposition, you'll be subpoenaed. You'll either talk to me now, or you'll talk to a judge later. Your choice." She caved in less than 10 minutes. Coral was the booking agent. That's what they called her. She set up the locations, created aliases for Tessa's payments. One of the men, 2, actually, were married. One had a kid. Coral handled their side too. Logistics, cover stories, payouts. She wasn't just helping. She was running Tessa's whole infidelity supply chain. But then Coral said something that turned my stomach. "There's one more name. One she'd never write down. Someone she swore would never talk." "Who?" I asked, already bracing. "She called him Routine. That's all I know. She saw him more than the others. I think it's someone you know." My ears buzzed. She had a nickname for him. Routine. Like some twisted pet name for the man she saw most. I ended the call and sat in silence. Routine. Someone close. Not paid. Not random. Someone in our life. The flash drive felt heavier in my pocket. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't just heartbroken or angry. I was afraid. Because if Routine was who I thought it might be, this story wasn't about cheating anymore. It was about betrayal that ran bone deep. I couldn't breathe when I heard the name. It wasn't even said with drama. Coral dropped it mid-sentence, trying to cushion the impact like I was too fragile to handle the truth. But no matter how gently you lower a blade, it still cuts. "Routine is Mason," she whispered. "Your best man." I stared at the wall like it might answer for her. Mason. My oldest friend. My best man. The guy who helped me pick the ring. The one who cried at our wedding and said, "You found someone rare, Eli. Don't screw it up." He was the one screwing. Literally. My wife. For over 2 years. My stomach felt hollow. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember getting up from the table. I do remember walking barefoot to the bathroom, sitting on the cold tile floor, and just shutting down. No tears left. No anger. Just silence. Like someone had cut the audio feed of my thoughts. It was all so casual to them. The betrayal. The manipulation. The scripting of my life behind my back like some off-Broadway production of Let's Humiliate Eli. And now I was sitting in the dark, trying to understand how the 2 people I loved most had choreographed this kind of cruelty with such ease. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up and replayed everything Mason had ever said to me for the past 5 years. The nights he came over to check on me, when Tessa was out of town. The surprise beers. The way he used to hug her a second too long. I noticed it once and told myself I was being insecure. I apologized to him. God, I apologized to the man who was sleeping with my wife. The next morning, I went nuclear. But not emotionally. Not publicly. I went cold. Quiet. I logged into a new social media account I had created under a fake name. A burner profile. I uploaded a collection of photos. Nothing explicit. Nothing legally dangerous. Just smiles. Group photos. Tessa and Mason laughing together. One with his arm around her waist while I stood 2 feet away, oblivious. One of her taking a mirror selfie in the hotel bathroom, time-stamped with the same day. Mason helped me move furniture while she was away. I added a single caption to each. Look closely. No tags. No hashtags. No names. Just an open loop. And then I followed everyone in her social circle. Within an hour, the account had 200 views. By lunch, it had 600. That was all I needed. By evening, Tessa called me 4 times. I didn't answer. Then Mason texted, "Can we talk?" I blocked him. He emailed. I replied with a single word, unfollowed. But I wasn't done. That night, I sent a manila envelope to Mason's wife. Yes, he was married, too. Jenna. Sweet, soft-spoken, always hosting baby showers and painting classes. She had once cried in Tessa's arms after a miscarriage. I mailed her a flash drive with a letter. You don't know me well, but we've both been lied to for far too long. I'm sorry you're finding out like this. I didn't sign it. She'd know. The next day, I got an email from Jenna. 3 lines. I've left the house. Thank you for the truth. I hope you burn them both down. I stared at that email for a long time. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't satisfying. It just made everything heavier. They hadn't just broken me. They broke the people around me. The ecosystem of trust I'd spent a lifetime building. The memories I once treasured now felt like trapdoors. How many of them were real? How many were just cover stories for their next rendezvous? I walked back into the apartment that evening. Tessa was sitting at the kitchen table, pale and silent. Her phone lay next to her, screen lit, vibrating constantly. She looked up at me, eyes wild. You ruined my life, she said softly. I said nothing. She stood. Mason's wife left him. My friends are texting me nonstop. What did you do, Eli? I walked past her and set a folder on the table. Bank transfers. Messages. Photos. The burner account printouts. I hadn't just built a case. I built a timeline. Labeled. Organized. Printable. This is what you did, I said. I just let it be seen. She reached for the folder, then stopped. There was nothing left to say. And still, she tried. I never meant to fall for him, she whispered. I turned, already walking toward the bedroom. Don't flatter yourself, I said. You didn't fall. You calculated. The courtroom was cold. Not physically, just emotionally sterile. The kind of place where the truth gets folded into legal terms and feelings are measured in custody percentages and property valuations. But I was calm. So calm it scared even me. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I did. Just not about her. The divorce was finalized in under 20 minutes. No contest. She didn't fight it. Not after everything surfaced. Mason never showed. His lawyer sent in some statement about emotional duress and privacy concerns. Tessa looked like a shadow of the woman I used to know, tight-lipped, eyes hollow. Her once golden confidence wilted into silence. The judge asked if I had anything to say. I could have said a lot, but all I said was, "No, Your Honor," because I wasn't there for drama. I was there for closure. Afterward, I walked out into the sunlight. It hit me harder than I expected. Not just the warmth, but the realization that I didn't belong to her story anymore. For the first time in over a decade, I was mine. The strange part? I didn't feel broken. I felt rebuilt. The whispers faded over the next month. The burner account disappeared after doing its job. Coral ghosted everyone. Mason's wife filed for divorce 2 days after mine was finalized. Tessa moved in with her mother and deactivated her socials. She emailed me once, asking if we could meet and talk things over. I didn't reply. What was there to talk about? That she mistook kindness for weakness? That I had spent years building a life she treated like a waiting room? No. She could talk to her silence. I spent the next 6 months doing something I hadn't done in years. I focused on myself. Not in a cliché way, I didn't suddenly become ripped or start skydiving, but I changed. I moved into a small place with a porch and a view. I started running, not to escape anything, just to move. I started painting again, badly, but consistently. And on Thursdays, I volunteered at a rescue shelter because dogs never lie to your face and then kiss your best friend behind your back. I also started therapy. At first, I thought therapy would just teach me how to forget. But instead, it helped me remember who I was before I bent myself into a man she could tolerate. Before I muted my joy, filtered my words, shrank my needs to fit into her expectations. One day, my therapist asked, "If you could go back, would you still marry her?" I thought about it, and I said, "Yes." She looked surprised. So was I? But I explained, if I hadn't married her, I wouldn't have learned how badly I needed to grow. I wouldn't have seen how small I'd made myself to be loved by someone who didn't know how to love. And I wouldn't have realized that peace is quieter than happiness, but 10 times more valuable. And it's true. I'm not bitter. I'm grateful. She gave me the worst heartbreak of my life, and it made me whole again. A year after the divorce, I met someone. Not through an app. Not at a bar. At the shelter. She was adopting a 3-legged mutt named Rascal, and we both reached for the same leash. We laughed. She told me she believed in second chances. I told her I finally did too. We're taking it slow. I don't compare her to anyone. I don't flinch when she hugs me. I don't question my worth when she says she likes my stupid jokes. And the best part? She doesn't see me as beige. She says I feel like home.